When the Soviet Union fell, ethnic tensions rose again. Are you concerned that that's about to, even more so, happen here in the UK with ethnic tensions? Or is there any way for us all to live together?
There is, and this brings us to Britishness versus ethnic identity or national identity even. Yeah. I think that, look, there are people you mentioned, like on the ethno-nationalist right, who will say, the only way to get everyone to live together is for them all to be of the same ethnic background and basically get rid of the foreigners and everything will be wonderful. Don't know if that's true, but more importantly, I don't think it's possible. I don't think it's possible. You're not going to get rid of the however many millions of people in this country from different backgrounds, ethnically, racially, culturally, etc. So we have to start where we are. We are living in a multi-ethnic society. Are there examples in history of multi-ethnic societies where people coexist peacefully? Yes. Almost every empire in history is that kind of society. How is it done? It's done by emphasizing the fact that we are all participants in a collective group identity that goes above and beyond our individual identity, like ethnicity, sex, race, sexuality, etc. We had actually, he's become an MP now for the Lib Dems, but we had a guy called Mike Martin who wrote a book called Why We Fight. He fought in Afghanistan for the British Army, with the British Army. He was in Afghanistan with the British Army. And he talked about the fact that oxytocin, which is the hormone that binds us to other people, is also the hormones that makes us wary of outsiders. In other words, if we accept that human beings are tribal, you cannot ever overcome tribalism. The only question is, at what level do you set the tribe? And my sense is that the nation state, or the empire state, if you like, is the right unit at which you... So I think it's fine that we hate the French. I don't have a problem with us hating the French and the Germans and the Americans and the whoever's. I think in the modern world, the way that it is designed, I think that level, the way that it is now, is the best form of tribalism that's available, right? Until the aliens arrive, and then we can all be human and against the aliens, right? I don't think within our small set of islands, the idea that we should set the level of tribalism at white people or brown people or black people or LGBTQ or men versus women. I don't think that's a recipe for a healthy society. What that means is we have to be very clear that there's a British identity. We have to be a lot more cognizant of encouraging people to buy into that. We have to be incredibly unashamed about distinguishing between people who are British and who are not British. It's one of the reasons that I think it's very, very important that we make, in law and in practice, very strong distinctions between people who are citizens and people who are not. So, for example, if you are not a British citizen, I don't think you should be... There will always be some example of people who go, well, what about this particular type of benefit or whatever? But broadly speaking, I think your entitlement to benefits in this country, unless you're a citizen of this country, should be as close to zero as we can manage it. Right? If you have come here illegally, you should have literally no rights other than like the basic rights of like, we can't torture you, we can't, etc. But if you're not a citizen of this country, you should not be entitled to the privileges that citizenship should bring. So I think that's part of it. And the other part of it, and you see this happening now in Scandinavian countries, they're becoming quite muscular about saying to people who come from other places, integrate or leave. I think that's really important.
Yeah, it's been so strange to see how fast that's happening in sort of Sweden. What is it that we are as a British? What is it? What is that unifying feature?
I have no idea. I keep asking people, and everyone goes, "Oh, I don't know. I don't think it's for me to define it. I don't think it's for me to define it. I think it's what I've done since I've come to this country as a boy is attempted to work out sort of broadly what those things are, and to attempt to integrate into that as best I can. That does not mean that I can write it down on a piece of paper. Mm-hmm. But I imagine as a collective, as a country, we actually might be able to come up with some things based on our history and our past and the wisdom of our ancestors and so on that might be able to give some shape to that. And then we should be incredibly thorough about making sure that everyone in this country is encouraged to buy into that and to participate in that. And if there are people who come from other countries that don't want to buy into that and want to live in a different way, they're very welcome to do so, just not in this country.
Unfortunately, as you know, look, we're all concerned. A lot of people are concerned about Islam. I think a lot of people are now very concerned. People who even 5 or 10 years ago would have said, "Oh no, that's racist" or whatever. Very concerned now, and historically, it doesn't sort of just stop, does it? It's sort of, if we look at Iran, Lebanon, Afghanistan, what happened there? Are you concerned that's going to happen here?
But in none of those countries did it happen by a few million people coming in through immigration, right? As far as I know,
perhaps not. No.
So it's a different.
The main thing is about having enough numbers, and they were sort of promulgated or pushed up by the left in those countries.
You have to flesh the argument about what's this fear that you're talking about.
In Lebanon and Afghanistan and Iran, they had quite secular societies. They were flawed societies, of course, because it was sort of royal family kind of aspect. But the left in those countries formed an alliance with radical Islam and then took over, then the left were killed. My concern here is you don't need a huge majority of people from a culture that has a much fiercer tradition than ours and feels stronger about their own culture than we do for them to take over. They don't need a majority for that.
Yeah.
And they can win democratically.
Well, I think they're a very, very long way away from winning democratically. I think it's very important to distinguish between a number of things. I wrote an article about this on my Substack. I don't know if you saw it, about Uzbekistan and Islam. So you can have the philosophical and religious arguments. They're perfectly legitimate arguments. I'm not that interested in them because we're talking at the level of politics here, right? How do you solve a problem is kind of what you're asking me, right? Or do you worry about this issue?
Sure.
So my sense is I've traveled to various Muslim countries in the former Soviet Union and elsewhere. And Muslim countries and Singapore, which is a non-Muslim country, are much better at dealing with the problem of radical Islam than we are.
Yeah.
And the reason is they don't bullshit themselves about radical Islam because they don't have political correctness that has to pretend that Islamists are these brilliant, peace-loving people, because they understand that these are the extremists within their own society. In the same way that, we were talking about it before we started, Hasidic Jews are kind of on the extreme end of Judaism. And there are certainly, I can tell you from personal experience, some Christians who are on the extreme ends of that religion. I'm not saying they're exactly equivalent. I'm not saying Christians are doing suicide bombings left, right, and center, or the Hasidic or whatever. But my point is, Muslim countries generally tend to be able to deal with this problem better, mostly, because they understand these people are extremists and they do what we should be doing with extremists, which is cracking down on them as hard as possible. Right? Now, people will say, well, that's, prejudice against the Muslim community. Or no. I think we should take the Muslim community at their word. Every time there's a terrorist attack that's committed by an Islamist, we are told that most Muslims are peace-loving people who want to be British and integrated and peaceful as much as we do. Okay, I believe that. And we're told that around the world, and this is factually correct, the biggest victims of Islamist extremism are Muslims. That's a fact, because what we've done is we've imported the civil war that's raging within the Islamic world into Britain, between the people who want a caliphate and the people who are actually quite happy with nation states.